Hello, amazing listeners. Welcome back to the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma, and today we're exploring a topic that will completely transform your language journey, cultural intelligence. Learning a language isn't just about words and grammar. It's about understanding the invisible rules that shape how people communicate. Are you ready for some mind-blowing insights? Let's dive in. Have you ever said something perfectly correct in English, but received strange looks from native speakers? Or maybe you've been confused by how Americans or British people interact in certain situations. That's where cultural intelligence comes in, and it's absolutely fascinating. Cultural intelligence, or CQ, is your ability to adapt and thrive in different cultural environments. And here's the exciting part. You can develop this skill just like any other. By the end of today's episode, you'll have practical strategies to boost your cultural understanding alongside your English skills. Let's start with a mind-blowing concept, the cultural iceberg. Imagine an iceberg floating in the ocean. Only about 10% is visible above water, while 90% remains hidden beneath the surface. Culture works exactly the same way. The visible part includes language, food, clothing, and celebrations, things you can easily observe. But beneath the surface, that's where you'll find the hidden rules about time, personal space, communication styles, and values that truly drive behavior. When you understand both parts of the iceberg, your conversations in English will feel incredibly more natural and connected. Now, let's practice some essential vocabulary about cultural intelligence. Repeat after me. Cultural norms, the standard behaviors expected in a specific culture. Nonverbal cues, communication without words, like gestures or expressions. High context culture, a culture where meaning is often implied, not directly stated. Low context culture, a culture that values direct, explicit communication. Cultural faux pas, a socially embarrassing action or mistake. Perfect. Let's see these in context. Understanding cultural norms helps you avoid awkward situations. Americans use many nonverbal cues while speaking, like nodding and smiling. Japan is considered a high-context culture where much is communicated indirectly. The United States is generally a low-context culture where people value directness. She made a cultural faux pas by refusing a gift in front of everyone. Did you know there are dramatic differences in conversational styles across English-speaking countries? This knowledge will revolutionize your interactions. In British culture, people often use understatement. If a British person says a movie was not bad, they might actually think it was excellent. Americans tend to be more direct and enthusiastic. In Australia, friendly teasing is often a sign of acceptance. Even the meaning of silence varies dramatically across cultures. In many Western countries, silence in conversation can feel uncomfortable. But in other cultures, silence is viewed as thoughtful and respectful. Understanding these patterns helps you interpret what people really mean, not just what they say. Isn't that powerful? Let me share a fascinating true story that demonstrates cultural intelligence in action. There was an American businessman who kept failing to close deals with potential Japanese partners despite having perfect meeting plans. The problem, he would directly ask for decisions during the first meeting. In Japanese business culture, relationships must be established before transactions. After learning this cultural pattern, he completely changed his approach, focusing first on building connections over several meetings before discussing business. His success rate skyrocketed. The lesson is extraordinary. Sometimes the biggest language barriers aren't about vocabulary or grammar at all. Now, here's a revolutionary concept that will transform your learning: cultural dimensions. Psychologist Gerd Hofstede identified 6 dimensions where cultures differ dramatically. One of the most important is individualism versus collectivism. In highly individualistic cultures like the United States, people emphasize personal achievement and independence. Phrases like "follow your passion" and "stand out from the crowd" reflect these values. In more collectivist cultures, Harmony within the group takes priority. Success might be defined by your contribution to family or community. These deep cultural values shape everything from how people give feedback to how they make decisions. When you understand these dimensions, suddenly so many confusing interactions make perfect sense. Time for a quick listening exercise. I'll describe two scenarios with cultural misunderstandings. Try to identify what's happening in each one. Scenario: Maria from Spain is talking with her American colleague John. She stands close while speaking and occasionally touches his arm for emphasis. John keeps subtly stepping back during the conversation, seeming uncomfortable. Scenario B: Takashi from Japan is in a meeting with Canadian colleagues. When asked if he agrees with the proposal, he says, "I will consider it," which his colleagues interpret as agreement. Later, they're surprised when he raises concerns about the plan. What's happening in these situations? In scenario, there's a difference in comfort with physical contact and personal space. In scenario B, there's a miscommunication because in Japanese culture, directly saying no can be considered impolite. Recognizing these patterns can help you navigate similar situations with confidence. Here's another game-changing insight. Every culture has invisible rules about politeness. In English-speaking countries, these rules might include phrases that sound optional but aren't. For example, when an American says, "Would you mind sending that email?" It sounds like a question, but it's actually a polite request that expects compliance. Similarly, British people often use sorry even when they've done nothing wrong. It's a conversational lubricant, not always an apology. Understanding these unwritten rules will dramatically improve how you're perceived when speaking English. Native speakers might not consciously notice when you follow these rules, but they'll definitely notice when you don't. Let's practice some useful phrases that demonstrate cultural awareness. I'm not familiar with the custom of ... double quotes. In my culture, we typically ... Could you help me understand if this is appropriate in this context? I notice people often ... Is that common here? I'm still learning about cultural expectations here. These phrases show curiosity and awareness while helping you gather important cultural information. We're approaching the end of today's episode, but I have an exciting challenge for you. This week, I want you to become a cultural detective. Choose an English language TV show or YouTube channel and watch for 15 minutes with the sound off. Focus entirely on the nonverbal communication, the gestures, facial expressions, personal space, and body language. What patterns do you notice? How do people show agreement, disagreement, or interest without words? Share your observations in our community using #CulturalDetective. I'll feature the most insightful comments in our next episode. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly achieve their goals while others struggle? The secret might be hiding in plain sight. It's all about habits. I'm telling you, once you understand how habits work, you'll never look at your daily routines the same way again. Before we jump in, let me remind you to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's get into today's incredible topic. Let's start with a mind-blowing fact. Did you know that according to research, about 40% of what you do every day isn't actually a decision? That's right, nearly half of your actions are automatic habits. Isn't that absolutely wild? Think about your morning routine. You probably don't consciously decide to brush your teeth or make coffee. You just do it automatically. These automatic behaviors are what we call habits. Now, here's where it gets exciting. Habits follow a simple pattern called the habit loop. This loop has 3 parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. Once you understand this pattern, you can literally hack your brain to create positive changes in your life. Let me break it down for you with a real example. Let's say you want to learn English more consistently. I know that's why many of you are listening right now. The cue might be setting your phone alarm for 7 a.m. labeled English practice. The routine is spending 15 minutes using a language app. And the reward could be marking your progress on a calendar and feeling that rush of accomplishment. After repeating this cycle, your brain begins to crave that feeling of accomplishment, and boom, you've built a powerful habit. Now, let's practice some useful vocabulary about habits. Repeat after me. To form a habit means to develop a regular pattern of behavior. To break a habit means to stop doing something you do regularly. A routine, a sequence of actions you follow regularly. Willpower, the mental strength to resist temptation and stick to goals. Consistency, doing something the same way over time. Excellent, let's use these words in context. She's trying to form a habit of reading for 30 minutes every day. It took him months to break his habit of checking social media first thing in the morning. A solid morning routine can set you up for a productive day. Sometimes willpower isn't enough. You need to change your environment too. The key to mastering any skill is consistency, not perfection. Now, I'd love to share an absolutely fascinating story that shows the incredible power of small habits. Have you heard of British cycling? For decades, they were so mediocre that some bike companies refused to sell bikes to the team because they feared it would hurt sales. Then, in 2003, they hired a coach named Dave Brailsford who believed in the aggregation of marginal gains, the idea that if you improve every area by just 1%, those small changes add up to remarkable improvement. They redesigned bike seats for better comfort, tested different massage gels to see which one helped muscles recover faster, and even painted the inside of their truck white to spot tiny specks of dust that might affect the bikes. These tiny 1% improvements seemed almost ridiculous on their own, but guess what happened? Within 5 years, they dominated the sport and won 60% of the gold medals at the 2008 Olympics. Then, British cyclists went on to win the Tour de France multiple times. Isn't that absolutely mind-blowing? Small habits, consistently applied, led to extraordinary results. And the same principle can work in your English learning journey. Let's talk about applying this to your language learning. Instead of setting vague goals like become fluent, try these specific habit-building strategies. Start ridiculously small, even just 5 minutes daily is perfect. Attach your new language habit to something you already do. For example, listen to this podcast while cooking dinner. Track your progress visually. Crossing days off a calendar creates a powerful visual chain you won't want to break. Join our Artificial Fluency community to share your progress and stay accountable. The link is in the show notes. Remember, consistency beats intensity every single time. I'd rather you practice 5 minutes every day than 3 hours once a week. Now, let's practice with a quick listening exercise. I'll describe to people and their habits. Try to identify which person is more likely to succeed in learning English. Person A studies English for 2 hours every Saturday. They use multiple apps, watch videos, and try to cram as much learning as possible into those 2 hours. They're often exhausted afterward. Person B studies English for 15 minutes every morning while drinking coffee. They focus on one thing each day. Monday is vocabulary, Tuesday is listening, Wednesday is speaking practice, and so on. They rarely miss a day. So, who do you think will make better progress? If you guessed Person B, you're absolutely right. The consistency of a daily habit, even for just 15 minutes, will almost always beat occasional intense study sessions. Here's another game-changing insight. When building new habits, your environment matters more than your motivation. Motivation comes and goes like the weather, but your environment is something you can control. If you want to read more English books, place them where you'll see them. If you want to practice speaking, set a daily calendar alert. Make the good habits obvious and the bad habits invisible. This strategy is so powerful because it doesn't rely on willpower, which we all know can be depleted after a long day. Now, let's practice some conversational phrases about habits that you can use right away. I'm trying to get into the habit of ... I've managed to break my habit of ... double quotes. I've been consistent with my ... What's your secret to sticking with ... double quotes? Have you tried building the habit of ... These phrases are perfect for discussing your progress with fellow English learners or native speakers gathered in the kitchen, laughing and talking. Curious, he stepped inside. To his surprise, Margaret was there, wearing an apron and showing a group of people how to knead dough. She looked up and saw Daniel. Her face lit up. "Daniel, come in." Daniel walked over and Margaret introduced him to the group. "Everyone, this is Daniel. He's the one who gave me the idea to start this baking class." The people around the table smiled and greeted him. Margaret turned back to him. "You were right. Teaching others is just as fun as baking for family. I feel happy again." Daniel felt a deep sense of joy. A simple conversation had led to something meaningful. Margaret handed him a warm slice of bread. "Here, try this." Daniel took a bite. It was soft, fresh, and delicious. As he left the community center, he thought about how powerful small actions could be. A simple cup of coffee, a kind conversation, a thoughtful suggestion. These little things could change someone's life. Now think about this. Have you ever had a conversation with someone that made a difference in their life? Or has someone ever spoken to you at just the right moment, when you needed it most? By listening to stories like these, you're not just improving your English, you're also learning about the beauty of human connection. Let's continue with another story. It was a chilly autumn morning when Daniel stepped out of his apartment, tightening his coat against the cool breeze. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange as the sun slowly rose, casting a soft glow over the quiet streets. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, a reminder that winter was just around the corner. Daniel had a long day ahead, but he decided to take a different route to work, one that passed through the old neighborhood park. He hadn't walked this way in months, and he was eager to see if anything had changed. As he strolled down the narrow sidewalk, he noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a wooden bench near the fountain. The man wore a faded brown coat and his hands rested on a wooden cane. His face was lined with age, and his gaze was fixed on the pigeons pecking at breadcrumbs on the ground. Daniel hesitated for a moment before walking over. He had always believed that small conversations could make a big difference, and something about the man's expression made him want to say hello. "Good morning," Daniel said with a warm smile. The old man looked up, surprised at first, but then nodded. "Good morning, young man," he replied, his voice deep and steady. Daniel sat down on the bench, leaving a respectful distance. "It's a peaceful morning, isn't it?" The man chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. Mornings like this remind me of when my wife and I used to walk here together. She loved watching the sun rise over the trees." Daniel's interest grew. "That sounds beautiful. Do you still come here often?" The old man nodded. "Every day. Even though she's not with me anymore, I feel close to her here. We spent many years sitting on this very bench, talking about everything and nothing at all." Daniel could hear the deep affection in the man's voice. "That must have been really special. How long were you married?" 52 years, the man said proudly. Her name was Eleanor. She had the most beautiful laugh. No matter how difficult life got, she always found a reason to smile. Daniel admired the man's devotion. "That's incredible. Not many people get to spend that much time with the person they love." The man sighed, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of memories. "We had our challenges, of course. Marriage isn't always easy. But we made a promise to always be there for each other. And we kept that promise." Daniel thought about his own life. He had always been busy with work, never taking much time to think about love and commitment in that way. "What's the secret to a lasting marriage?" he asked curiously. The old man smiled. "Patience, understanding, and kindness. But most importantly, never stop communicating. Even when you're angry, even when you're tired, talk to each other. Share your thoughts, your fears, your dreams. That's what keeps a bond strong." Daniel nodded, letting the words sink in. "That's great advice. I think a lot of people forget how important communication is." The man chuckled again. "These days, everyone is too busy looking at their phones instead of talking to the person sitting next to them, but real connection happens face to face." Daniel looked around the park. He noticed a few people jogging, some walking their dogs, and others sitting on benches, lost in their own worlds. He realized how rare it was for strangers to have conversations like this anymore. The old man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out photograph. He handed it to Daniel. "This was taken on our 25th wedding anniversary." Daniel looked at the picture. It showed a younger version of the man, standing next to a woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. They were holding hands, standing in front of the very same fountain. "You both look so happy," Daniel said. The old man nodded. "We were. Life wasn't perfect, but we made the most of every moment." Daniel returned the photograph. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I feel like I learned something valuable today." The old man patted Daniel's shoulder. "I'm glad. And if you ever find someone special, remember, love isn't about grand gestures. It's about the little things you do every day." Daniel smiled. "I'll remember that." As the sun rose higher in the sky, Daniel realized he needed to get to work. He stood up and shook the old man's hand. "It was really nice talking to you." "The pleasure was mine," the man said. "Have a good day, young man." Daniel walked away, feeling lighter. The conversation had been unexpected, but it left him with a new perspective. He had started the morning thinking about work and deadlines, but now he was thinking about something deeper, about relationships, about time, about what truly matters in life. As he reached the bus stop, he saw a young couple sitting nearby, both looking at their phones, not speaking to each other. He smiled to himself, thinking about what the old man had said. Maybe today he would try something different. Maybe he would put his phone away more often and really listen to the people around him. As the bus arrived, he stepped on with a sense of gratitude. Life was full of lessons, and sometimes the most meaningful ones came from unexpected conversations. Now take a moment to think. Have you ever learned something valuable from a stranger? Sometimes the wisdom we need comes from the most unexpected places. By listening to stories like these, you're not just improving your English, you're also learning about the world and the people in it. Let's continue with another story. On a quiet evening in the heart of the city, Daniel sat in a small cafe, sipping a cup of hot tea while watching people pass by. The cafe was warm and inviting, with the soft glow of yellow lights and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It had been a long day at work, and he needed a moment to unwind. As he stared out the window, lost in thought, he heard a voice nearby. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Daniel looked up to see a man in his early 50s standing beside his table. He had a kind face, graying hair, and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a dark coat and carried a small notebook in his hand. "No. Go ahead," Daniel said, moving his bag to make space. The man sat down and let out a deep sigh. "Long day?" he asked with a friendly smile. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, Just one of those days where everything feels a bit overwhelming. The man chuckled. I know the feeling. Life has a way of keeping us on our toes. There was a moment of silence before the man extended his hand. I'm Richard, by the way. Daniel, he replied, shaking his hand. Richard placed his notebook on the table and took a sip of his coffee. You know, whenever I feel overwhelmed, I like to write things down. It helps me clear my mind. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Really? What do you write about? Anything and everything, Richard said with a smile. Thoughts, memories, lessons I've learned. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That's interesting. I've never been much of a writer. Richard chuckled. Neither was I at first. But life has a way of teaching us things. And sometimes we don't realize how much we've learned until we write it down. Daniel was curious. What's something you've learned recently? Richard opened his notebook and flipped through a few pages before stopping at one. He tapped the page with his finger. This. I wrote it last week. Daniel leaned forward as Richard read aloud. Time is the one thing we never get back. We chase money, success, and recognition, but in the end, all that truly matters is how we spend our time and who we spend it with. Daniel listened carefully. The words struck a chord. That's deep. I think a lot of us forget that. Richard nodded. We do. We get so caught up in daily life that we forget to slow down and appreciate what really matters. Daniel thought for a moment. So, what's something you regret not doing sooner? Richard smiled thoughtfully. Spending more time with my family. When I was younger, I was so focused on my career that I missed a lot of important moments. My daughter's first school play, my son's soccer matches, even simple dinners with my wife. I always told myself, I'll make time later. But later doesn't always come. Daniel felt a strange sense of familiarity in Richard's words. He too often prioritized work over personal time. Richard continued, One day my daughter sat me down and said, Dad, you're always busy. I feel like I don't really know you. That hit me hard. Daniel could see the emotion in Richard's eyes. What did you do after that? Richard sighed. I changed. I started leaving work earlier. I started making time. And you know, what? I realized that the world doesn't stop if you take a break. Success isn't just about work. It's about the relationships you build along the way. Daniel let the words sink in. That's something I need to remember. I always tell myself that I'm working hard for the future, but maybe I'm missing the present. Richard smiled. It's never too late to change. Every day is a new chance to make better choices. Just then, the cafe door opened and a young woman walked in, looking around. When she spotted Richard, her face lit up with a big smile. Dad, she called, walking over to the table. Richard stood up with a grin. Emma, right on time. Daniel watched as Richard hugged his daughter. She was in her mid-20s with bright eyes and a cheerful expression. Sorry I'm late, she said, sitting down. Traffic was crazy. No worries, Richard replied. I was just having a great conversation with Daniel here. Emma turned to Daniel with a warm smile. Nice to meet you. Daniel smiled back. Nice to meet you too. Richard glanced at his watch. Well, we should get going. We have a little father-daughter dinner planned. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Yep. He promised to teach me how to cook my grandmother's famous stew. Richard chuckled. See? I'm making up for lost time. Daniel watched as they gathered their things. Before leaving, Richard turned to him and said, "Remember, Daniel, don't wait until it's too late to spend time with the people who matter. Work will always be there, but people won't." Daniel nodded. "Thanks for the advice. I won't forget it." As Richard and Emma walked out of the cafe, Daniel sat back and thought about everything they had talked about. He reached for a napkin and picked up a pen from the table. For the first time in a long time, he started writing. Time is the one thing we never get back. Now, take a moment to reflect. Who is someone in your life that you haven't spent enough time with? Is there a call you need to make? A visit you need to plan? Sometimes life's greatest lessons come from unexpected encounters. Let's continue with another story. It was a cool Saturday morning, and Daniel woke up feeling a little restless. The sun peeked through his curtains, casting soft golden light across his small apartment. He had planned to stay in, maybe read a book or catch up on emails, but something inside him told him he needed to go out. Maybe a walk would help clear his mind. After a quick breakfast, he put on his jacket and stepped outside. The streets were calm, with only a few early risers out and about. He decided to take a stroll through a part of the city he hadn't visited in years, a quiet neighborhood where he used to live as a child. As he walked past familiar buildings, memories came rushing back. The small bakery where his mother used to buy fresh bread every morning, the bookstore where he had spent hours reading as a teenager, and the old playground where he and his younger brother used to run around without a care in the world. Lost in thought, he turned a corner and found himself in front of a tiny, old-fashioned shop. The wooden sign above the door read, "Mr. Carter's Repair Shop." Daniel's eyes widened. He hadn't seen or thought about. Mr. Carter was an elderly man who used to fix almost anything. Broken radios, watches, lamps, even bicycles. When Daniel was a boy, he would often visit the shop just to watch Mr. Carter work. He loved seeing how the old man carefully took things apart and put them back together, making broken things useful again. Curious, Daniel pushed the door open. A small bell above the door chimed, and the familiar scent of wood, oil, and old books filled the air. The shop looked exactly as he remembered. Clocks ticking on the walls, shelves filled with tools, and an old workbench in the center of the room. And there, sitting behind the counter, was Mr. Carter. The old man looked up, adjusting his glasses. His hair was completely white now, but his sharp eyes still held the same warmth. "Well, well," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "If it isn't little Daniel, haven't seen you in years, son," Daniel grinned. "It's been a long time, Mr. Carter. I wasn't even sure this place was still here." Mr. Carter chuckled. "Still here. Still fixing things. Though these days people don't bring me as much to repair. Everyone just buys new things instead of fixing the old ones." Daniel nodded, looking around. "That's true. People throw things away so quickly now." Mr. Carter gestured for him to sit. "And not just things, my boy. People give up on relationships, dreams, even themselves. No one has the patience to fix things anymore." Daniel sat down, thinking about what he had just heard. "That's kind of sad." "It is," Mr. Carter agreed. "But I believe anything worth keeping is worth fixing. Let me tell you a story." Daniel leaned in, listening carefully. "Many years ago," Mr. Carter began, "a young man came into my shop. He was frustrated, carrying an old broken pocket watch. It had belonged to his father and it had stopped working. He told me he had taken it to 3 different repair shops, but they all said it was beyond saving. They told him to throw it away and buy a new one." Daniel listened closely as Mr. Carter continued. "But you know me," the old man said with a twinkle in his eye. "I don't believe in throwing things away so easily. So I took the watch, opened it up, and carefully examined every tiny piece. It was a mess. Gears out of place, dust clogging the mechanism, a missing screw. It wasn't an easy job, but I worked on it for hours, cleaning each part, adjusting the gears, and finding a replacement screw from another old watch. And do you know what happened? Daniel shook his head. What? Mr. Carter smiled. The watch started ticking again. Daniel couldn't help but smile. That must have been a great feeling. It was, Mr. Carter said. But do you know what was even better? The young man's reaction. He looked at that watch like it was a miracle. He said, "This is more than just a watch. It's my father's memory. It reminds me of him every time I look at it." Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. Mr. Carter leaned forward. And that's when I realized, sometimes, fixing things isn't just about the object. It's about the meaning behind it. People are quick to give up on things when they seem broken. But with patience and effort, a lot of things can be repaired. Watches, friendships, even hearts. Daniel sat in silence, absorbing the words. Finally, he spoke. "That's really powerful, Mr. Carter. And I think you're right. People give up too easily. Maybe we all need to try a little harder before deciding something is beyond fixing." The old man nodded. Exactly. The world teaches us that when something is broken, we should throw it away. But sometimes we just need to take a closer look and put in the work. Daniel looked around the shop, at the old clock still ticking, at the tools neatly arranged on the shelves. This place was more than just a repair shop. It was a place of patience, of second chances. He stood up and shook Mr. Carter's hand. "Thank you for the story. I think I needed to hear that today." Mr. Carter smiled warmly. "Anytime, son, and remember, don't be too quick to give up on the things that matter." As Daniel stepped out of the shop, he felt lighter. He thought about the people in his life, about things he had given up on too quickly. Maybe it was time to fix some things. Now take a moment to think. Have you ever given up on something too quickly? Maybe it was a friendship, a goal, or even a personal challenge. Before deciding something is beyond saving, ask yourself, have you really tried to fix it? Listening to real-life stories like these not only helps you improve your English, but also teaches important life lessons. As Daniel walked down the street, his mind was still on the conversation with Mr. Carter. He had always been the type of person who rushed through life, always on the go, trying to get things done quickly. But something about the old man's words had left a deep impression on him. Maybe it was time to slow down, to pay more attention to the things he had been ignoring. He decided to take a longer walk through the park nearby. The park was quiet, with only a few people scattered around, some jogging, some walking their dogs, and others sitting on benches, reading or chatting. It was a peaceful place, and Daniel felt a sense of calm as he walked along the winding paths, listening to the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the trees. As he walked, he came across a small playground. There was a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, playing alone. He was climbing up a jungle gym, trying to reach the top. Daniel couldn't help but smile as he watched the boy's determination. He was struggling a little, but he didn't give up. He kept trying, over and over, until finally he made it to the top and let out a victorious cheer. Daniel walked over to him. "Great job. That was impressive," he said. The boy looked at him with a proud smile. "Thanks. I kept trying until I did it." Daniel knelt down to his level. "I could see that. You didn't give up. That's something a lot of people forget to do. Sometimes when things get tough, people just stop trying. But you kept going and you made it." The boy nodded eagerly. "Yeah. It's fun to try again. Daniel chuckled. It sure is. You know, when I was your age, I would have given up halfway through. But watching you today, I realize how important it is to keep trying, even when it's hard. The boy smiled brightly. You can do anything if you don't give up. Daniel stood up, feeling inspired by the boy's simple yet powerful words. You're right. You can do anything if you don't give up. As he walked away, he couldn't help but think about the lessons he had learned that day. The stories from Mr. Carter and the boy in the playground were reminders of something he had forgotten, the value of persistence. Later that afternoon, Daniel met up with his friend Alex at a local cafe. Alex was one of those people who always seemed to be full of energy, always excited about something new. He was a bit of a risk-taker, someone who loved to try new things even if there was a chance of failure. Hey Daniel, long time no see. Alex greeted him with a wide grin as Daniel sat down at the table. Yeah, it's been a while, Daniel replied, smiling back. How's everything going? Alex leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Great. I've been working on this new project. I'm thinking about starting a small business. It's something I've always wanted to do, and now I think it's time to take the leap. Daniel raised an eyebrow. A business? That's a big step. What kind of business? I'm thinking of opening a cafe, Alex said enthusiastically. But not just any cafe. It's going to be a place where people can relax, have a good meal, and maybe even learn something new. I want it to be a community spot where people come together. That sounds amazing, Daniel said, impressed. But starting a business is a huge challenge. Have you thought about all the things that could go wrong? Alex laughed. Of course. But I've also thought about everything that could go right. I believe that if you really want something, you have to take risks. And if you fail, you learn from it and try again. Daniel paused, reflecting on the conversation with Mr. Carter and the lesson from the boy at the playground. You know, Alex, I've been thinking about that a lot today. About not giving up and learning from failure. Alex nodded. Exactly. The best people I know are the ones who keep going, even when things don't work out at first. And when you try and fail, you get closer to success. Every failure teaches you something valuable. Daniel smiled. I guess I've been too focused on playing it safe. Maybe it's time I took a few more risks myself. Alex grinned. That's the spirit. Life is all about stepping out of your comfort zone and pushing your limits. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll never know what you're capable of. The conversation reminded Daniel of the importance of trying new things and pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. He realized that he had been too cautious for too long, always worried about making mistakes. But he now understood that failure wasn't something to fear. It was just a part of the journey. Later that evening, Daniel found himself at home, sitting at his desk with a notebook in front of him. He had a new idea for a project he had been thinking about for months but had been too afraid to start. As he stared at the blank page, he felt a surge of excitement. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just start. He picked up his pen and began to write. Step 1. Start. As he wrote down the first step of his new project, he felt a sense of purpose. The first step was always the hardest, but once you took it, everything else fell into place. Daniel looked around his apartment. It was small, but it was his. It was a space where he could create, learn, and grow. He had spent so many years focusing on work, on the things that were safe and predictable. But now, he understood the importance of taking risks, of pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. The next day, Daniel met with a few friends at the park. They were talking about their plans for the future, and Daniel couldn't help but share his new idea. He told them about his project and how he was finally taking the leap. "That's amazing, Daniel," one of his friends said. "I'm so proud of you. You've always been the kind of person who works hard, but now you're really taking charge of your own future." Daniel smiled, feeling the support of his friends. "It's scary, but I'm excited. I've realized that the only way to grow is to challenge myself." "And you'll do great," another friend added. "Remember, failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning. And as long as you keep learning, you'll always get better." Daniel felt a wave of gratitude for his friends and the lessons he had learned that day. From Mr. Carter to the young boy at the playground to his conversation with Alex, everything had come together in a way he couldn't have planned. Now, as he looked forward to his new journey, he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. Have you ever felt like taking a risk or starting something new, but were too afraid to do it? What's something you've been putting off because you're worried about failing? Take a moment to reflect and think about how you can push yourself to take that first step. Let's continue with another story. As the sun set that evening, Daniel sat quietly on his balcony, reflecting on everything he had learned over the past few days. It had been a whirlwind of thoughts, ideas, and realizations, and he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had made a decision to take more chances and push himself beyond his comfort zone. Now, all that was left to do was to take the next step. But as he sat there, lost in his thoughts, his phone buzzed with a message from his friend Sarah. She had been one of his closest friends for years, someone who always seemed to have a different perspective on things. "Hey Daniel, are you free tomorrow? I want to talk to you about something." Curious, Daniel quickly replied, "Sure, what's up?" Sarah's message came in a few minutes later. "I've been thinking a lot lately about making a change in my life. I've been stuck in the same routine for so long, and I want to do something different, but I'm not sure where to start." Daniel smiled as he read her message. He knew exactly how she felt. For so long, he had been in the same place, stuck in a routine, too scared to take that first step. But now, things were different. He typed back, "I totally get that, Sarah. No, I've been feeling the same way recently. I think it's time for both of us to make a change. Maybe we can figure it out together." Sarah responded almost immediately. "That sounds great. Let's meet up tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you." The next day, Daniel met Sarah at their favorite cafe. As soon as he saw her, he could tell that she had been thinking deeply about her future. She looked a little nervous, but also determined. "So, what's going on?" Daniel asked, sitting down across from her. Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been working at the same job for a few years now. It's not a bad job, but I'm not happy. I feel like I'm just going through the motions every day, and I know I could be doing more, but I'm scared to leave the safety of what I know." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had been in the same position not too long ago. "I know that feeling. It's hard to leave something familiar, even if it's not making you happy. But sometimes you have to take risks in order to grow. Have you thought about what you—" Sarah looked down at her coffee cup, then up at Daniel. "I've always wanted to work with animals. I love them, and I think it would make me feel more fulfilled. But I'm not sure how to get started. What if I fail?" Daniel smiled, remembering his own fears about failure. I used to feel the same way. I was worried about failing and making a mistake. But what I've learned is that failing isn't the end. It's just a part of the process. If you don't try, you'll never know what could be possible." Sarah looked thoughtful. "That's true. But what if I leave my job and it doesn't Work out? Daniel reached across the table and gently placed his hand on hers. If it doesn't work out, you'll learn something new. You'll gain experience, and you'll be in a better position to try again. But if you don't take that step, you'll always wonder what could have been. And trust me, that's even scarier than trying and failing. Sarah nodded slowly, taking in Daniel's words. You're right. I guess I've been holding myself back because I'm scared. But maybe it's time to face that fear. That's the spirit, Daniel said, smiling. We can do this together. Let's take the first step. The rest of their conversation was filled with excitement and ideas about how Sarah could start her journey toward working with animals. They talked about courses she could take, volunteer opportunities, and how she could slowly make the transition. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt hopeful. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to make the change. After their meeting, Daniel felt inspired by Sarah's courage. He knew that their conversation had been a turning point for both of them. They were no longer going to let fear control their lives. They were ready to take risks, learn from their mistakes, and grow. As Daniel walked home that afternoon, he thought about how far he had come. Only a few days ago, he had been uncertain and afraid to make a change. But now he was excited about the possibilities ahead. He had taken that first step, and he knew that no matter what happened, he was on the right path. He thought about Sarah and how she had been brave enough to talk about her fears and dreams. He realized that sometimes all it takes is one conversation, one moment of clarity, to make a huge difference in your life. It wasn't always easy, but Daniel knew that the journey was worth it. Every step, every challenge was a chance to learn and grow. And with that thought, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Have you ever had a conversation that changed the way you thought about something? Maybe you talked with a friend about your goals or heard a story that inspired you. Take a moment to think about how these conversations have helped shape your journey. What step can you take today to move closer to your own goals? Let's continue with another story. As the weeks went by, Daniel found himself making small but important changes in his life. He had started taking his own advice, facing his fears and stepping out of his comfort zone. One day, while walking through the park, he met a woman named Lisa who was walking her dog. She had a friendly smile, and her dog, Max, was a golden retriever with a wagging tail that seemed to brighten the whole park. "Hey there, looks like Max is in a good mood today," Daniel said, smiling as he approached them. Lisa laughed. "Yeah, he's always like this. I'm Lisa, by the way." "I'm Daniel," he said. "It's nice to meet you. I'm just enjoying the walk, thinking about a few things." "I know what you mean," Lisa replied. "Sometimes a good walk can clear your mind. I've been thinking about making some changes in my own life." Daniel raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of changes?" Lisa paused, looking down at Max for a moment before looking back up at Daniel. "Well, I've been working in the same office job for years now. It's comfortable, but I don't feel passionate about it anymore. I've always wanted to start my own business, but I'm scared to leave the security of my job. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing by staying in something that feels safe, but unfulfilling." Daniel understood exactly how she felt. He had been in a similar position not long ago. "I get that." That's all for today's episode of Artificial Fluency. I'm absolutely convinced that improving your cultural intelligence will take your English skills to extraordinary new heights. Remember, true fluency happens when you understand both the words and the invisible cultural context behind them. Next week, we'll explore the art of small talk, those seemingly simple conversations that can actually be the most challenging for language learners. Until then, this is Emma reminding you that language is the doorway to culture, and every new cultural insight brings you one step closer to true fluency. Keep being curious, and I'll see you next week for another mind-expanding episode.